Good evening. I'm Rudyard Griffiths, the
like
moderator of the Munk Dialogues, and it's terrific to have you joining us for our program right before the U.S. election, a historic election with big consequences for Canada, obviously for the United States, but for many issues around the world, from climate change to the fight against the rise of authoritarianism and populism, to the effects of a rising China. All of that caught up in this once-in-a-generation U.S. election. For the last number of Wednesdays, we have been focusing on the U.S. election, and we do that again tonight with a person that I consider, as many do, one of America's smartest and most experienced political strategists. His name is James Carville. He, as I mentioned, is storied in his experience both in the United States and around the world as a campaign advisor. He played a key role in the election of President Bill Clinton. He's the author of a dozen or more best-selling books. Many of them are on our bookshelves. He's a prolific writer. And to his credit, to the spirit of the Munk Dialogues, which is all about reaching across the proverbial aisle, trying to understand arguments from the other side, he is married from a long time to a Republican political consultant, the great Mary Matlin. James Carville joins us now from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. James, great to have you on the program.
God, I just regret. I wish I was in Toronto. I love that place. I've been there any number of times, and it's a great city. I love your airport. I like the culture there, but the whole thing, it's a great town. So I'm sorry I'm not there, but we do what we do under the circumstances.
Absolutely. And talking about the circumstances, James, you have a hurricane bearing down on your city, your beloved city of New Orleans.
Right.
Luckily, you're a little way away in Baton Rouge, coming to us live.
Right.
You're okay? Everyone's doing all right?
I'm fine. I was in New Orleans last night, and I looked at this and said, hell, I'm 76 years old. And so I came up, there's a hotel on the LSU campus where I teach, and I was just out and took a run, and a friend of mine's coming to pick me up after this, and I think I'm going to go to dinner and sit outside. My wife and my daughter stayed in New Orleans, and I've been through too many of these. They're really not any fun, and when the electricity comes back on, I'll go back. But till then, I'm going to be in Baton Rouge. It's only 75 miles away.
Well, James, let's dive in here. We are less than a week out from this historic once-in-a-generation election. So much at stake, so many dynamics at play. I've got to ask you off the top just to give us your read, your sense of how things are going to turn out on November 3rd. What's going to happen? What are your instincts telling you right now?
Biden's going to win, all right? But the question is how much? And the question is what happens to the United States Senate. And the polling average is now at 538, which it's about 9 points. It's kind of been inflexible. I mean, what's happened so far in this race is not very much. If you look at the trend lines, they were steady before COVID. I mean, one of the things that Trump puts out, or people kind of have a tendency to believe, that Trump was cruising to re-election, and then COVID came and derailed him, and now he's in trouble. There's just everything to support that but facts. Actually, some of the Senate races that people call me all day, I've probably seen more polls than all but 5 people in the United States. And I think I'm hopeful that things are breaking the Democrats' way, and we can eradicate this just awful, God-awful, and just humiliating, embarrassing moment that the United States is going through. I'm just really torn up about it. I've worked in, as you point out, I've worked in 22 different countries. And literally every place that I've gone, people like the United States. I mean, they think we are kind of big and sometimes, clumsy and, can be full of ourselves, but basically like what our country is and what it stands for. And then we had this. So I'm not very shy about my opinions of what's happening to my country, but I think that we're on the verge of a real breakthrough here. I think our darkest hour is going to turn into our finest hour. I really do.
James, what about what could come after the election in the days and weeks following? There's been obviously a lot of discussion, some real concern about two things. One, the risk of a contested election. One of the parties, probably the party of President Trump, fighting this election in the courts, in state legislatures? And also, what do you see as the risk of violence, of political violence spilling over into the streets when it seems that either side is just convinced, maybe they're not convinced that they can win, but they're convinced that they should win?
Well, I have an expression in testament to my hometown in New Orleans. We have to win by more than 5, and that's no jive. All right? If this thing is close, I mean, we got to admit that that's possible. They would steal it from us. Anything within spitting range, we're done. I hate to say that because we're supposedly a nation of laws, of constitutional democracy and all of that. Well, that's under strain. I think we'll win by more than 5, and there's a point beyond which they can't steal it. In terms of the violence, I podcast and I had Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan on, who was these idiots tried to kidnap her. It's something I worry about, and it depends on the aftermath of the election. It depends on how much we win by, but this ethno-nationalism is really a serious thing, and Trump has just exacerbated it and made it much more serious as a result of him being president. And it's a real concern. It's a concern that I have. I think a lot of people do, and I think the first step in dealing with this is to win this election decisively. And when I like to watch these documentaries, World War II, and when you look at, a beaten army, you look at these Nazis in Stalingrad, and they have that vacant, starving, hopeless look on their face. I mean, that's what we got to see here. But we have to beat this thing and beat it decisively, and tell people this is not who we are. And I hope we do. I'm really do. But we got to win this, and winning it by a little bit would help some. But in order to get rid of this, it would help a lot.
James, what do we look for on election night, on Tuesday evening, to try to understand, as you say, whether this will be a decisive win or whether these new risks emerge of a contested election? What states would you point viewers to, and how do we interpret the result on Tuesday evening when so many people have voted by absentee ballot, a real record for this election? Right. And supposedly, James, if I understand this correctly, many of those ballots could take days to count after the election.
Okay, so let's start. It's election night, all right? And returns are going to come in. All right, let's just take Pennsylvania. If according to 538, if Biden carries Pennsylvania, there's a 96% chance he wins the Electoral College. If Trump carries, it's an 84. I'm not a quant. They have an algorithm, but they're pretty good. Okay, they mock that which they don't. I think there's something to it. I'm going to be looking really closely at Erie County, which is in the northwest corner of Pennsylvania, the extreme northwest. It's right across the Lake Erie from Canada. Its profile matches a lot of state, and I want to see how Biden does in terms of margin, how against Hillary in 2016. I probably want to take a look at Luzerne County, which is in northeast Pennsylvania, Wilkes-Barre, and I'll probably look at some of those, because in order for Trump to win Pennsylvania, he's got to roll up votes in places like that: Cambria, Washington County, Beaver, Westmoreland. Obviously, Biden is going to win big in the city of Philadelphia. He'll win big in Allegheny County, which is Pittsburgh. He'll win really big in the suburban counties around Philadelphia: Chester, Delaware, Montgomery, Bucks. So I know that's going to roll up. I know we're going to get big vote in Philadelphia. The next state I'm going to look really hard at, it's a must-win state for Trump, is North Carolina. They will report pretty early, and these returns will be more complete than you think. I mean, if the deal is that some of these absentee ballots won't be counted, you'll have a pretty determinative thing of what's happened in Pennsylvania. You know good what's going to happen in North Carolina. I'll be looking at New Hanover County, which is Wilmington, which is on the North Carolina coast, because that population reflects the state pretty good in terms of racial splits, age-wise. They got, pretty good Republican Party there. There's a university there, so that'll be mixed. Uh, the big one I'm going to be watching is Georgia. I think Georgia is going to go, a good chance it might go from red to blue. But look at Gwinnett County. Gwinnett County is like Toronto. All right, it's not, there are more people from 12% of the people in Gwinnett County identify as neither African American or Caucasian. It's something else. All right, there's tons of people from Asia, South Asia, South America, the Middle East. Gwinnett County it looks like Toronto, it looks like Los Angeles. And it's very popular. And if the margin gets over 60 in Gwinnett, bingo. We're going to carry Georgia. Trump, he can't win unless he wins Georgia.
So, James, before we get to Florida, what do you think about, just to give you some of the counter arguments as to why maybe we shouldn't necessarily be as optimistic as you are right now in terms of a Democratic win? People are citing the large voter registration drives that the Republican Party has been seemingly very successful at implementing in states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and elsewhere. Right. And that, obviously you're no fan of this president, but he, as a politician, you must respect, or you must have some admiration for his ability to fire up his core supporters. That this is a guy that campaigns with a lot of energy, a lot of passion, and it gets people riled up, heading to the polls.
All right, let's just take it antiseptically, right? You say he's a great politician. He could rile people up. I'll concede that. He won the presidency with 46.1% of the people behind him. He had a freakish distribution. He had Comey. He had the Russians. He had God knows what else, behind him. So he won, all right? Then we had off-year elections in 2018. The single highest turnout in an off-year election in the United States since women were granted the right to vote, right? The single largest margin of an off-year election, 8.6%. Breathtaking victory. He couldn't elect a governor of Kentucky or a governor of Louisiana. He has barely ever polled above 45. He's lost 80% of the off-year elections. The Republicans have literally underperformed in every one of them. He's now on polling average 9 points down. Republicans are running away from him like the devil runs away from holy water. All right? You have people say, well, I really disagree with him. I didn't want to say anything. But, no one is running with him. I am totally, and I'm being just coldly honest here, I am totally unimpressed with his political powers. You're right. He does have a real connection with 35% of the country. And the people that he connects with tend to be the most declining demographic in the United States. They're older, non-college white people. What's growing in our country, all right? And he's also activated in a way that I couldn't imagine an entire class of people, namely female college-educated whites. I mean, they're next to African Americans. They're the largest Democratic voting bloc in the United States. So I am, and you find me one Republican that really thinks that Trump is doing their party any good, or that wants to run with him, and other than somebody in Alabama, I'll fall out of this chair. I'm just being honest.
No, I appreciate it, James. That's the beauty of these Munk Dialogues, is you and I don't have to compress this conversation into a 4 or 5 minute discussion here. We're going to get to a lot of audience questions tonight. I want to remind audience members that if you have a question, email it to us now, dialogues@munkdebates.com, and I'll be sure to put it to James. Well, we're going to go to questions momentarily, so get your question in now. They've been coming in over the last day or so for those of you that received our emails, but for those of you watching live right now, send us a question to dialogues@munkdebates.com. James, we're going to go to those questions momentarily, but just a few other big boxes to tick with you here. Blue wave. So there's some hypotheses here that, Biden's lead here could be so significant that the down ballot effects really start to gather momentum going into next week's vote on Tuesday, and the Senate could flip along with the House, along with the presidency. What kind of odds do you give that right now? I know you're very confident that Biden's going to win, but how confident are you in a blue wave scenario?
I mean, I think it's a real possibility. I wouldn't say definitively it's going to be a blue wave. I think it's a real possibility. I think we're going to pick up House seats. That I'm almost certain, and we already have the House. So that I'm more confident of than anything. I think the chances are better than not that we pick up the Senate. The margin is going to be really important. I mean, if you go in there with 51 senators and you want to do big things, you're really constrained. You're really constrained. So the margin in the Senate is really going to matter. The other thing that really matters in the United States is control of these state legislative chambers. Because remember, we have redistricting coming up after this election cycle. And there are state legislative chambers that we could take in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Texas, Michigan, and I'm probably missing a couple. So there's a lot at stake in this election, and all the way from the White House to the State House, probably the courthouse too, for all I know. So I feel like it's a real possibility, but I can't sit here and say that I'm as confident I am that Biden is going to win the presidency, that this is going to happen.
James, finally, before we get to questions, you throughout the race for the Democratic nomination for president were critical of what you saw as the lurch to the left on the part of the party embodied in the candidacy of Bernie Sanders. What is your feeling about that faction in the party? It's a party you know well. Post this vote, and to what extent is the Biden presidency going to similarly have to lurch left to reflect the reality of the Democratic Party today and where the energy is in that party at this moment?
Well, first of all, Biden's raised $450 million, so there's energy all around the Democratic Party. The second thing is, let's assume that our hopes are fulfilled and we do very well in the Senate. I'm assuming we do very well. Incoming Senate Democratic caucus is going to be much more moderate and pragmatic than the current one. Because who would be coming to town? Cal Cunningham from North Carolina, John Ossoff from Georgia, maybe India Hager from Texas, for sure. Mark Kelly, an astronaut from Arizona, John Hickenlooper, the famously moderate governor of Colorado, Steve Bullock, the governor of Montana, Al Gross, not even a Democrat, an independent from Alaska, maybe Jamie Harrison from South Carolina. And the Democratic Party made a gigantic statement in the primaries. I mean, Bernie Sanders was the best funded, the most energetic. He was in every debate, all right? He competed everywhere, and frankly, he lost. We live in a democracy. The Democratic Party expressed it overwhelmingly. Now, you're right. The left of the party, they never won an election that had a Democratic performance of under plus 25. And I know these people. I talked to them, and I said, look, when you win an election in Kentucky, come see me. All right, or even you win an election in Georgia. All right, and I mean the press loves this story. They just love this story. And they're energetic. They raise money. They organize. All right, but we had the voters voted, and they voted overwhelmingly in the Democratic Party, and it wasn't close. You can go look at literally across the board at every election. But by the way, the African Americans are the key part of this party. And we're going to hear from them and all of the, other people that contributed and did this. And I'm a liberal. I don't mince it at all. I believe that government has a significant role to play in people's lives. I'm not a leftist. I don't want to shut people up. All right. I think, I don't believe in all of that. I'm kind of an old line liberal. If somebody's got something to say it. But I'm very, very believe in a proactive government, I very much, believe that there's a real role for the government to play in healthcare. I can't talk enough about climate. I live it every day. I teach it, everything else. But we also got to understand. We got to respect the wishes of Democrats across this country, and they express themselves very decisively and very authoritatively.
You've just done that for us, James, and I thank you. I want to, before we go to our first question, remind viewers that we will have, again, a post-dialogue members Q&A. After every program, we bring in the Canadian dimension of our discussion. That's what we explore in our post-dialogue Q&A tonight with Andrew Coyne, Globe and Mail columnist and just one of the brightest minds out there in terms of understanding current events and their impact and relevance for Canada and Canadians. So please, if you are a member, join us. If you're not already a member of the Munk Debates, go on to our website, www.monkdebates.com/membership. It's free to join, and we will immediately send you an email link to come on and engage in the post-dialogue Q&A with Andrew Coyne. Okay, James, a ton of questions that have come in here. I think it's a sign of just the, well, on one hand, the excitement, on the other hand, the trepidation and worry, frankly, over what's going to happen next week, Tuesday.
I don't blame you at all. I'm confident, but I don't sleep well.
Yeah, you must be on tender hooks, my friend.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
I can bet. Okay, let's go to the first emailed question. It's from somebody called James. The best explanation for Trump's 2016 election is that blue states and the media took Trump literally but not seriously, while red states took him seriously but not literally. Can you help explain to the majority of Canadians who are anxious, how did the United States get itself to this point? So maybe, James, just to boil that down to something succinct, what created Trump? I mean, did Trump create Trump? Did American culture and politics create Trump? You know, who's the cart and who's the horse?
Well, boy, I mean, Trump came along. First of all, he had a message, all right, and it's a message that had a certain resonance with people, and they were looking beyond. I can't emphasize this enough. He got 46.1. Let's don't. And he had a distributional draw that is unique to American democracy. So I'm not denying that. So but he came along, and people thought it was they felt some angst, and they thought it was a way that they could be heard. And unfortunately, they went a little bit too far with it. And I think that Mrs. Clinton campaign, without Comey, he would have never won. All right, that political scientists have really studied that, and you can look at Kathleen Hall, Jameson. You can look at any number of papers in political science. Also, the Russians were very involved and were very helpful, and her campaign had a flawed strategic premise that Trump had become so unacceptable to the suburbs and so such an affront that he couldn't overtake the margin. He was unacceptable in the suburbs, but he did overtake the margin, and we vacated places in particularly in the rural north. I'm part of a project now. We're spending $70 million in 77 counties in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, and doing very organic on the stuff on the ground. And we're going to carry Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And there had been this kind of in the Democratic Party. This is a problem of urban parties, and I'm sure it's somewhat of a problem in Canada. Is we give off odors that we're better than other people, that we're the educated, we're the diverse, we're the tolerant, we're the hip, and we kind of dominate the culture. And and we really gave people, rural whites. Look, I'm a rural white guy. I grew up 25 miles south of the LSU campus. Well, so far in the sticks, we had to pipe sunshine in. And and most people become a Democrat in the United States, like I did when I was a little boy, because I didn't hate anybody. Like, I don't care if somebody's black or anything else. Why I'm occupied with that? And I think Biden has done a good job of not giving off these noxious notions of cultural superiority. And I think that's going to help us some. And I hope the party never returns to that. And I think it's very much of an attitude, sometimes of urban left, dominated left leaning parties. And we got taught a lesson. Unfortunately, it was a lesson that the pain was not worthy of of the mistake we made. But I hope we learned a lesson. I hope we learned a lesson.
Okay, here comes a question from Sean Moore, who's watching live right now. Sean asks, quote, "It was the economy, stupid, in 1992." James, that was your famous
right.
kind of encapsulation of that election. Sean asks you, what is it in 2020? How would you characterize the central issue in this presidential race?
Well, I think the central issue is they just want change. All right, they just don't want to live like this anymore. And let's go back and talk about the economy, stupid, in healthcare, because in Canada it's a little bit different. You don't when you go and you get a EKG, PSA test, breast cancer screening. That is one event in your life. Your bank account is another event in your life. The two affluent Americans, we have insurance. So they're not to 80% of people in the country are underinsured or no insurance. Their health care is the economy to them. And that's become increasingly the case because healthcare costs have exceeded inflation rates over the years by a lot. And don't even get me started on the way that people view prescription drug costs. So it's a little bit hard for a Canadian, given your system, to understand in our system how the economy and healthcare costs have merged and become related phenomena. But the other thing is, this has happened before Trump was president, to be fair, the inequality in this country is really bad. And most of the growth during Trump, think about it, country wasn't any more growth under Trump, first 3 years of Trump than there was on Biden, and it was even less job growth, and that was with $2 trillion in stock buybacks, stimulus that they had. But 2/3 of the growth even when Trump was president took place in counties that Hillary carried. I mean, think about it. Where's all the growth? And so everybody saw this, and very justifiably, and it wasn't just people in the whites in the industrial Midwest. Everybody saw that the country was growing, and they weren't participating in it. And we have to figure a way in it. It's a very intractable. I say intractable. It's a very difficult problem when the next spurt of growth comes. How can we have more equitable and more broad-based growth? Because it's not doing us any good in the country when 6% of the people have the benefits of 75% of the growth in the country. I'm pulling those numbers out of my ass, but it's close. It's a good estimate, I promise you.
Okay, let's go to the next email question. We appreciate your candor, James. This is from Bill. Could I please have your opinion on the Twitter, Facebook censorship of the New York Post and the White House on the Hunter Biden family corruption allegations? So, James, just to encapsulate this for those of us in our Canadian audience who might not be familiar with the latest developments around Hunter Biden. A laptop was found at a repair shop. It was given to Rudy Giuliani, who is the president's lawyer, who in turn has given it to the FBI, the Delaware Police, Fox News, the New York Post, and others. And a lot of media is refusing to cover the findings of the material on that laptop, which seem to have been now verified by friends of Hunter Biden and friends of the Biden family. What's your thought on that? And I mean, you're in favor of free speech. You classify yourself as a small L liberal. What do you think about this?
Okay, I'll tell you exactly what I think. First of all, Hunter Biden lives in Los Angeles. So the theory is that he flew to Philadelphia, got on a train, and went to Wilmington, Delaware, to a computer repair shop operated by a guy who's legally blind, and had a computer full of incriminating information, and forgot to pick the computer up, and it stayed there for 90 days. And so the guy opens the computer, sees this incriminating information, and somehow or another figures out how to get in touch with Rudy Giuliani. Okay, at that point, if you believe that, then man, I don't know what to tell you, but we're not on the same planet. So they take the story and they try to take it to the Wall Street Journal. And you can read Ben Smith's piece in the New York Times. The Wall Street Journal, which is editorially is very, very extremely conservative, but journalistically it has high standards. So then they take it to the New York Post. They can't find anybody to put a byline on the story. So they find some employee that was a producer for Sean Hannity. So they put a byline on the story. Okay. Then you say this is censorship. Facebook is not the government. Twitter is not the government. I disagree. That's not the government. If the government would say you can't do that, that's the First Amendment says Congress shall pass no law. If anybody works at a company, if you work at a law firm and you post something online and you use a racist or sexist term, you get fired. It's just that simple. Now, they're welcome to. I'm not that big a. They think that big tech. I think they're monopolies. I think that we could look at ways to do that. I'm not an antitrust expert at all, but conservatives used to be, let the free enterprise system flourish. Well, if you don't like Facebook or you don't like Google, then go get the Koch brothers or Robert Mercer or anybody you want. Go start build your better mousetrap. But they, of course, Facebook and of course they succumb to pressure. Should you be allowed to should the Proud Boys be allowed access to Facebook? Should they be allowed access to Twitter? Should they be allowed access to TikTok? I don't know. I'm not a tech. I don't know what the hell these things are. But the idea that somehow or another this is the heavy hand of government censorship, it's just not true. And the story is so patently ridiculous and absurd on its face that we'd all agree that we all. That you shouldn't have these kind of racist or calls to violence. I mean, but they would have a perfect right to do that. Whether or not the government does, that's quite another story. But the telling of this narrative is preposterous. It really is. The computer repair shop at the strip mall in Wilmington.
I hear you. There's always that, Occam's razor, usually the shortest point between two, the shortest distance or line between 2 points.
Between 2 points, yeah.
That's usually where the truth lies.
I think Occam's razor is more the obvious answer, but it's the same thing. It's the same thing.
Yeah. Let's go to a question here from an audience member watching right now, Harry Van Mulligan. He's asking, do you agree that if Trump had followed the science and had communicated as per CDC guidance, like some other world leaders, he would be cruising now for a massive re-election? And in short, to what extent, James, is COVID this president's Achilles heel? I mean, would Joe Biden really have a chance if there wasn't 200,000 plus Americans dead tragically because of this virus?
Okay, let's start. If you go look at the NBC Wall Street Journal poll, or you look at the 538 polling averages, he was profoundly underwater in January of 2020. All right? So, and once that the Democratic Party decided that it was not going to commit suicide, all right, he was done. That was his only hope. So here he is. He's at a 43.3 approval or whatever. Right? You could look all of this up. Then you have this national crisis that comes. Now, any politician that says, look, I'm not doing that great, and I have a chance to exhibit real leadership. And so all of these governors around the country that exhibited real leadership, what did they do? They saw their numbers go up. They're going to get reelected, all right? And instead of just if I was a raw, pure political animal, and I had no other, and I was in the Trump White House, I would literally go in and say, God damn, this is an opportunity. We're losing these women. We're losing these educated people. This is a chance for you to step in the breach, to do this, to show that you've grown in the office and everything. You know what? He might have been able to make it. He might have been able to make it. And now you got Jared talking about bragging if you to Bob Woodward. They just released a tape of how they beat the doctors back and how they did that. And then he came, talking about Clorox and bleach, and it was going to go away. And people just saw that and just were repulsed. And he attacks Dr. Fauci. He's got like a 70% approval rating. I mean, if you got a 43% approval rating and you have a person in your government that has a 70, I would attach to that person like a barnacle on the bottom of a boat on Lake Ontario. Maybe you don't have barnacles in fresh water, but you got them in salt water. All right. I mean, the whole thing politically makes utterly no sense at all. And then we're supposed to think that Jared Kushner is some kind of a political genius. I mean, give me a break. It saved any number of politicians who were doing mediocre, who like stepped up and looked like they were leaders, and look where you are right now, and look what's going to happen next Tuesday. I mean, it was a real, forget the tragedy of this. It was it's the biggest swing and miss of a political opportunity maybe in my lifetime.
A lot of people, James, a whole bunch of different questions coming in here from people asking, in effect, what happens if Trump simply refuses to concede the election? I mean, this guy has, operated outside of the norms of your politics now for 4 years. What's stopping him post-election from simply saying, I don't accept the result. This is a rigged outcome, and my lawyers are going to fight this to the end, and I'm not going anywhere?
Well, what would happen is on January the 20th, there would be so many four-star generals volunteering to execute an extraction procedure at the White House. They would go in and get him and throw his fat ass out on Pennsylvania Avenue if he decided that he wasn't going to leave.
And his supporters, James?
I mean, well, I don't know. His supporters, we live in a democracy. We had a profoundly disappointing night in November of 2016. When you enter an election and you live in a country that is a democracy, when you lose, you lose. That's just the nature of the way it goes. That's what happens. And I think if he loses the way that I think he will, the way that I hope he will, people are not going to stand for that. I mean, you're just not going to stand for that. I know that people think that, but he is not. If he loses this election, and and again, I have to be careful here, because if he loses it by a little bit, they'll fix this thing. I don't have any confidence in the system, but if he loses by as much as I think he will, he won't have any other choice. He just won't have any other choice. And by the way, they have any number of vulnerable Republican senators coming up in 2022, and what person that wants to face re-election wants to deny the will of the people? I think that possibility is not very
viable. Okay. James, you've got your LSU hat on there, which I want to now kind of call on you as kind of lecturer-in-chief to help us with a bit of a civics lesson here. A bunch of questions asking, basically, can the Biden government do anything between the election and inauguration when it comes to, especially to the pandemic? What happens in your system for that critical period here of almost 3 months, James? I mean, is this just like a deep freeze where everybody puts their tools down and no substantial decisions are made?
Well, in a parliamentary system, and I think this is true in Canada, I know it's true in Britain and most places, when election night, when you win, you move into 10 Downing Street.
Yeah,
There's no such thing
the
as
next
a transition.
morning.
One day you're not prime minister, the next day you're prime minister. It is a unique thing that is built into our system. I think it's very proper to worry about it in that period of time. It used to be but before it was in March. Before you had a change of power. It took much more time than this. It's something to worry about. Again, a lot depends on the margin. If he wins a popular vote by 4 and gets 325 electoral votes, he'll be president. But it's going to be different. If he wins it decisively, I think you're going to see a lot of pressure on, and if he tries to put out some crazy orders or something, I think there's going to be people that are going to refuse to follow it. Now, I hate to say that, but I think it's a real possibility. But I don't know. I'm not a government expert. I mean, my life starts when the campaign starts and kind of ends when the campaign is over, and I walk out and move on to my next mission.
Yeah.
So I as a citizen, I worry about it.
Yeah.
And again, I come back to it. The margin is everything here.
I hear you. Gail Taylor and a number of other people are emailing in, James, asking about your thoughts on the future of the Republican Party after this. In particular here, we've got people, Wayne Leach asking, you had predicted that in the past that Republican senators would finally break with Trump. They don't, at least at this point. There's one or two maybe that have made some musings here in the final weeks of the campaign. But what is the future of this Republican Party, and are you concerned? I mean, you have a two-party system there. You need two functioning parties to come together to present the policy options and ideas for America. Where does the Republican Party go?
Ben, that is a topic, and I've become quite friendly with these never Trump Republicans. And they will say, and I've heard any number of other Republicans said, the only way the Republican Party can have a future is it has to be destroyed as it is. All right, I'm just telling you that is a very commonly held view among a lot of very prominent former Republicans. Now that this ethno-nationalism has been exposed, I don't. Will they do as Democrats did, where in 2000 during the primaries, all the Democrats cared about, can you win? And when Bernie had his single payer and Senator Warren was going along and she came out for single payer, that was the end of a campaign. I don't think Democrats had much of a problem with a single payer system. They just thought it was electorally toxic. So it's going to see, do you want to be in U.S. politics in a two-party system? When a political party stops being a coalition and it becomes a cult, then it destroys itself. And that was my argument to Democrats. I want to be part of a coalition. I don't want to be part of a cult. And when you have multi-party systems, you can have differences within the government, but in a two-party system, the coalitions are built within the parties. I don't know. I would certainly argue that I have nothing against a slightly nationalistic, government skeptic, low tax, kind of traditionalist party. There's appeal to that around America, but that party no longer exists. I mean, actually, it's more than that. It's more like the Democrats now, almost. that a trade. I mean, we've never had. This is the first anti-free trade president we've ever had, yeah. Republican or Democrat.
Do you think the Trump kids have a future in politics? We've seen dynastic, politics in the United States. I mean, the Clintons in some ways were part of that, husband to wife. What happens to Trump and the Trump family after this, if you're right, and there is a definitive loss next week?
Well, what I really think, and this is not hyperbole.
Yep.
All right, I want to be very careful. I think that when after this is over, the malfeasance, the racism, the incompetence and everything will be dwarfed by one thing, and that is the massive, staggering corruption. And from all across, from Trump, the family, to everything. And I think the real problem that the United States is going to have is this. The Manhattan DA, the New York Attorney General, and by the way, the new Attorney General. And suppose it says, look, Trump says, if you leave me and my family alone, I will go to Mar-a-Lago. All right, I'll do Trump TV, but that's it. If you continue this, I'm going to travel around the country, and you know what I can do, and you know how difficult I can make life for you. So what are you? So you're sitting there, you're saying, look, I just want this guy to go away. If we go through this, and trust me, that the Mueller report, what people don't understand is Mueller saved all the evidence of obstruction of justice. There is no reason that the next attorney general couldn't indict him. Now, he could resign, and Pence could pardon him, or he could take a gamble and pardon himself and hope that's legal. He can't pardon himself in New York State. He can't do that. And so, and now you got, Bannon's indicted. They're going to probably indict Parcell, and they're just going to squeeze them to no end. So he's got massive, massive criminal exposure, and I'm sure the family does too. I don't know that, but I wouldn't be surprised they do. So that's something that people has not been fully appreciated. Is that there's a story that the campaign $1 billion they've fitted it away. And they went through the records, and it got 300 and something million have gone to like a dummy corporation that nobody can find. They were billing the taxpayers $3 for a glass of water that he drank at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, come on. This is a grift on a level, and as history starts to unfold, and every day you see in these stories are coming even late in the campaign. I don't know how much of effect they're going to have in the campaign, but that guy is going to have to negotiate his way out of trouble.
And what's your view, James?
I mean, do
you think just for the sake of peace and reconciliation that you just let that stuff go? You don't pursue political opponents outside of elected office. And I know your friend Hillary Clinton has been on the other side of that from this president, but can you kind of turn the other cheek? Should you turn the other cheek?
Yeah, that's a question. I think President Obama did many good things when he was president. I think one of the things that contributed to the Trump presidency was the decision they made not to prosecute some of these bankers for the financial crisis. I think that's so incensed people that they get away with it. The average, and I mean, people have this basic sense of fairness. Is, look, if I don't pay a ticket, or I cheat on my taxes, I'm held accountable, and they're not. Against that, you're saying, look, if the guy if we just get, it's a nightmare. I don't want to revisit it. I don't want to live that. I don't want people in the streets. I don't want him agitating people. It's not a slam dunk call, but this is something that I think is going to happen.
Yeah.
This is real. This is really real. I mean, there's just breathtaking corruption. The Justice Department, you have high-level people that are resigning. They know what's going on. They have, indictments that are, the Bannon stuff. That Bannon can stay out of jail only one way, and he's got to dime Trump.
Yeah.
And once people face that prospect, it's a tough.
Focuses the mind. Question here from Keith in British Columbia, and a bunch of other people emailing in live right now, James, basically asking, you've witnessed now over the course of your storied political career this seemingly relentless polarization of American society. Where does this go, James? Where does this lead? Does it find a release somewhere? Is there the risk here of a much more deeper fracturing of the country? We've talked not just about violence on election night, but we're seeing more political violence now in the streets during this election between different groups with different ideologies. What's your sense of where America's headed in the decades to come, and does this political polarization ever resolve itself?
The question is very good and very frightening. Let me give you one of the real things of polarization that America's experiencing. I'll give you a statistic, and I want you to think about this. The amount of geographical polarization we've had in this country is really staggering. Let's call a supermajority county. That is a county that one party carries by 50 points. So you have to win it by 75-25 to qualify. there are slightly more than 3,100 county equivalents in the United States. In 1992, when Bill Clinton won, there were 96 supermajority counties. All right. In 2016, out of 3,100, slightly more than 3,100, there were more than 1,300 supermajority counties. And so what's going to happen on election night, there are people that are going to vote for Trump that don't know anybody that's not for him. How could he lose? And this kind of toxicity is built up over a period of time in American politics. And I come back to something I've said often tonight, but I say it often because I think it's that important. Biden's win has to be decisive. And the America needs an intervention, and the intervention has got to come from American voters. And it's got to tell politicians that this is not the way to win elections. And I would say I would give Biden very high marks on at making an attempt to be a unifier, kind of respecting people. And if he has a big win, hopefully he can deal with this. But this is a significant problem. It is not at all being neurotic to worry about it. I worry about it a lot. I talk about it a lot in my class. And I think it all starts, everything starts hopefully next Tuesday night. I think Biden's going to win. I'm less confident. I'm hopeful, but not cocky about the margin.
Okay. Let's take a couple more email questions. I'm conscious that we've got James very generous with his time coming up to the top of the hour at 9 p.m. Eastern. So this is from Adelaide. She's asking, on the assumption that votes will be counted for a few days and possibly weeks following the election, so here maybe she's seeing less than a completely decisive win, James, how can we be sure that Trump will be removed from the White House? How is the post-election period likely to play out? So you've answered part of that in the sense you say when it comes around to the inauguration, he's going to be out of there regardless. But give us a little bit more, paint us a little bit more of a detailed picture of what happens between the election and inauguration based on two scenarios. One, your scenario of a definitive Biden win, and second, play out the scenario for us maybe where the election has been closer than you might have liked.
Well, again, it's not my kind of area of I'm so focused on the election. I think it's going to matter. And I keep coming back. If it's close, we're going to have lawsuits everywhere. We're going to have state legislatures trying to direct electors to vote. We're going to have whatever mess we're in now, it'll be compounded. It would be a nightmare. And the courts would be full. The streets would be full. The virus is not going anywhere. Has anybody taken a look at the American stock market over the last 2 days? Can you imagine what will happen to world financial markets if we have paralysis in the United States after the election? And I'm talking about less than a week from now. I know there are many financially sophisticated people in this audience. Do you really want to think about that?
Yeah, it's a scary thought.
Because that is a real possibility. I can't sit here and tell you that that's not going to happen. I can tell you with a certainty that this virus is not going to be gone. I can tell you for a certainty that the polarization in the United States is not going to be gone. The only thing that can save us is our people.
I hear that from you, James. You've got some optimism here.
I hope I wrote a piece in a publication called The Bulwark. It's a bunch of never Trump.
Yep.
It's a Republican.
Bill Kristol,
thing.
I think, is the founder.
If you want to know my real feelings, you can find that. And it's a pretty good piece. It's pretty good site. The Bulwark. BULWARK.
We'll put a link up on the page for your Munk Dialogue, directing people to that article on the Bulwark. I saw it and read it and really enjoyed it. James, just a couple more questions here to squeeze in before we let you go at the top of the hour, and I'm also going to get your book recommendations before we do that. Okay. Jay asking, what do you think Trump's legacy is going to be as a president? Jay's pointing out decisively tilting the U.S. Supreme Court, and let's face it, much of the U.S. federal judicial system to the conservative right, or the mishandling of the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, James, you disagree with this president fundamentally in his policies, but
Right.
he will have a legacy, won't he?
Right. The legacy will be the staggering, unbelievable corruption. It'll be written in history books 200 years from now. Just the incompetence. I mean, Mitch McConnell. Okay, so the Federal Society says appoint this guy judge. Okay, you do that. They ram it through. I don't know if that's a major accomplishment or not. Fewer people have confidence in the Supreme Court in the United States right now, probably any time in modern history. Do you call that an accomplishment? I mean, do you call? I wouldn't call it an accomplishment, but it is a fact. All right. Does there anybody think that his handling of this virus is anything other than catastrophic? I mean, really, that's an accomplishment. But again, I come back to the thing that will be, and this I'm very confident of. Many years from now, the amount of corruption that we're gonna unearth is just going to be breathtaking. It's already breathtaking. We haven't even gotten started yet.
Well, let's see. That shoe may and will surely drop. James, we asked you, along with all of our other participants in the Munk Dialogue, to recommend some books to our
Sure.
viewers and listeners that they could read to try to understand this moment that we're in. Let's quickly go through your suggestions here. The first is The Hard Hat Riot by David Paul Cahoon. Give us a sense of why you chose that book.
Well, that was in 1969, and that was the kind of beginning of the kind of urban left, and until then, these sort of construction, blue collar people were kind of Kennedy Democrats, and this started this kind of resentment, the politics of resentment that actually ultimately led to Trump. And it's a very well researched, documented, written book, and I think it gives you the origin. It's the best thing I've seen to explain the origins of Trumpism. And I highly recommend it. And
Excellent,
he's
James.
also a dear friend, and he has a very blue collar perspective on politics, and it's good. It's very good.
Excellent. I had not heard of it, so I look forward to adding that to my bookshelf. Your next book is by a good friend of yours, Paul Begala. His book, You're Fired, The Perfect Guide to Beating Donald Trump.
I like that, not so much because who would care about beating Donald Trump after November, but what it does is it explains how campaigns work, explains how research is done. Paul's a very good writer. I think its value outlives the campaign. But I would recommend this more for people who want to be political professionals or have a real interest in politics. It's a little bit of a junkie's book, but I think it's very instructive about how to organize, how politics, and he's a very witty, clever guy. You can learn a lot from it, beyond beating Donald Trump.
Hey, terrific. And your third book recommendation is What It Takes by Richard Ben Kramer. Unpack this book for us.
All right, that Richard to be by most everybody the single best book on a political campaign ever. It was on a 1988 campaign, and it carried it all the way through. What is really fascinating is the richness of the detail, how much you learn about these different candidates, how much you learn about American campaigns, particularly in that era. If you remember, it was in some ways it was not the most exciting or culturally significant political campaign. But the reason I put it on the list because there's no one that would argue with the fact that Richard Ben Kramer's book is I don't know what's the word, magisterial account of a political campaign ever. And I think that's pretty much of a given. And when a book has that kind of acclamation, it's probably worth a look. And it's worth a look for anybody that's interested in these. And there've been a lot of really good campaign books written. Don't get me wrong. I'm not diminishing any of them, but that's just such a perfect example of what a good campaign book should be. Is that?
A classic. And again, just a reminder to our viewers and listeners that all these books, James's recommendations, plus many of his titles, are available for you to order at indigo.ca. Just go to the website, punch in Munk, and you'll go to our micro store on our partner indigo.ca website. Check out James's book. Check out these books that James has recommended. And James, I just want to end by saying that often people in their minds see you as one of the tough kind of scrappers and fighters of U.S. politics, and I'm sure that's true. You've led some storied campaigns in the U.S. and around the world, but tonight I think you've shown that other side, the side that I've gotten to know over the years, James, having you up here to Canada to speak, which is your thoughtfulness, the reasoned approach that you take, the history, the knowledge that you bring to your arguments, the civility and substance that you've entered into this dialogue with us. So on behalf of our audience tonight, thank you for coming on the Munk Dialogues.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And I love, we've been in a number of times, and there's so many things about Canada that I like. And, I've done to Newfoundland and British Columbia, and God knows I've been to Calgary a number of times. It's a terrific country, and you should be very, very proud. The thing that I love about Canadians is just any country that has a sense of modesty to put a leaf on its flag. It's got to be a country that's admired. Everybody else has a lion or, eagle or something like that. And you're very modest people, but you have so much to be proud of and so much to be thankful for in Canada. And I hope the United States can earn the trust and respect and admirations of Canadians that we've historically enjoyed.
Hey, thank you, James. Be safe down there as Hurricane Zeta barrels through Louisiana and your hometown of New Orleans. Hopefully you'll get back there soon. Your wife and daughter are safe. So thank you again for making the effort to come on the show tonight, despite all this.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful conversation.
Okay, we'll do it again soon. Ladies and gentlemen, that was James Carville. So just a reminder to our Munk members that we'll be kicking off in just minutes from now our post-dialogue Q&A with journalist Andrew Coyne of the Globe and Mail. He's going to give us his thoughts on the consequences of Tuesday's vote for Canadian issues, from the economy to our foreign affairs to the border to our own politics here. How is it being affected by this historic U.S. election? Also, just a reminder to our listening audience and viewing audience that we're going to take a break next week from the Munk Dialogues. This is a big election. It's going to have a lot of impacts. We want to let those play out over a week to 10 days. So we'll be back at the Munk Dialogues with some terrific new talks coming up in November. Our first will be on the November 11th, Remembrance Day. Martin Wolf of the Financial Times of London, one of the smartest journalists out there on the economy, on the big trends that are shaping our lives. He'll be giving us his perspective from the UK. We'll also have Anne Applebaum, best-selling author, former Munk debater, coming to us also from Europe with her views on the future of democracy in the aftermath of the election. Then, keeping with an international theme, Zhang Weiwei, one of China's leading academics, advocate of a big new role for China in the world. We'll get his take on the U.S. election, on Canada-China relations. Zhang Weiwei, a voice not to be missed. And then December 2nd, Barry Weiss, a provocative, outspoken critic of so-called cancel culture, formerly of the New York Times, where she resigned over the paper's editorial policies and decisions. We're going to have a discussion with Barry Weiss on the future of politics and culture and the media on December 2nd. And then we'll round out this autumn series with one more talk that we'll announce shortly for that second week in December. I'd like to thank the great group of sponsors and supporters who make these dialogues happen. First and foremost, the originators of the Munk Dialogues, the Peter and Melanie Munk Charitable Foundation. Thank you to Peter and Melanie. And our presenting sponsors, Onyx and Gluskin Chef, a great group of supporting sponsors, Tories LLP, Bond Brand Loyalty, and Cassette Media, and our media partners, bringing these dialogues to audiences across North America, from CPAC to GEM to Facebook to Indigo to WNED, WBFO, PBS NPR Buffalo, and to our media and digital partner, the Globe and Mail. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching the Munk Dialogues. We are going to again take next week off, but we'll be back on November 11th at 8 p.m. Eastern with Martin Wolf of the Financial Times of London. Be sure to mark that dialogue in your calendar. Visit our website, monkdebate.com, for more information on these upcoming dialogues. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you'll join me in a matter of moments for our post-member Q&A with Andrew Coyne. Thanks again. Be well. Let's see what this election brings next Tuesday.